Francisco Lázaro, Stockholm, 1912. The morning sun over Stockholm shimmered with the promise of glory. Francisco Lázaro, a young Portuguese marathon runner, tightened his bandages, his body glistening under layers of wax and soap he had applied to protect his skin from the northern chill. To him, this was the race of a lifetime, a chance to etch Portugal's name in Olympic history. As the starting gun fired, Lázaro surged forward with fierce determination. But beneath his pride and discipline, a silent danger brewed. His skin, coated in wax, couldn't sweat, and under the relentless Scandinavian sun, his body turned into a furnace. By the halfway mark, his breathing had grown shallow. His stride faltered. Spectators noticed his face contorted in agony as he stumbled, his legs buckling beneath him. "Agua! Agua!" he gasped. "Water!" Before collapsing by the roadside. Medical staff rushed to his side, but the damage was irreversible. Francisco Lázaro's body temperature had soared past the limits of human endurance. He died that night from severe heat stroke, only 21 years old. The following morning, flags across the Olympic Village flew at half-mast. It was the first recorded death of an athlete during the modern games, a tragedy born of pride, ignorance, and the brutal cost of ambition. Knut Jensen, Rome, 1960. Rome's summer heat radiated off the tarmac like fire. Danish cyclist Knut Jensen, 23 years old, was one of many young men racing under a merciless Mediterranean sun. The air was thick, suffocating, each breath like inhaling steam. Jensen pushed forward, sweat streaming down his face. Then, suddenly, he began to sway. His teammates shouted, "Knut!" But it was too late. His bike veered violently. He crashed hard onto the asphalt, his head striking the ground. He tried to stand, trembling, but his body betrayed him. His legs gave way, and he collapsed once more, motionless. Spectators thought it was heat exhaustion. But when doctors examined him, the truth was darker. Traces of amphetamines were found in his system. The combination of performance-enhancing drugs and the scorching Roman heat had driven his body beyond its limits. His heart gave out. Jensen's death sent shockwaves through the Olympic world and led to the creation of the first formal anti-doping policies. But for his family, no regulation could erase the sight of a young man who died chasing speed, a symbol of human frailty masked by the pursuit of perfection. Nodar Kumaritashvili, Vancouver, 2010. The icy track at Whistler was the fastest ever built. Athletes whispered about it. 150 kilometers per hour, faster than most had ever dared. Georgian luger Nodar Kumaritashvili knew the risks, but he couldn't let fear show. His father had been a luger. His family expected nothing less than courage. He sat on the sled, took a deep breath, and launched himself down the track. The world blurred around him. Steel, ice, and speed fused into a deafening roar. But in one fateful curve, his sled lost its line. The G-forces slammed him against the wall. His body lifted into the air. In an instant of horror, he was thrown from the track and hit a steel support beam at nearly 90 miles per hour. Silence followed, the kind that freezes time. Medics rushed in, but there was no saving him. He was only 21. The opening ceremony of the Vancouver Olympics that evening was shadowed by grief. As his coffin was draped in Georgia's flag, the world watched the replay in disbelief. A young man dying within hours of the games' start, sacrificed to the pursuit of speed and spectacle. Francisco Varallo, Antwerp, 1920. The smell of chalk and iron filled the air inside the Belgian arena. Francisco Varallo, an Argentine weightlifter, stood before the barbell, veins bulging, his body trembling with anticipation. The roar of the crowd drowned out everything else. He approached the lift with raw determination, a chance to claim Argentina's first Olympic medal in weightlifting. The bar rose to his chest, then overhead. For a moment, he held it there, triumphant, until his body began to shake violently. Witnesses later said they heard a crack, followed by a terrible cry. The barbell came crashing down, striking his neck and chest with crushing force. Panic erupted as officials rushed to his side, but the damage was instantaneous, a crushed windpipe, internal bleeding. He died minutes later, surrounded by silence and disbelief. The games continued, but the atmosphere in the hall changed forever. The Olympic spirit had met its darkest moment, the sight of a young athlete crushed by his own ambition. Kazimierz Kay-Skrzypecki, Innsbruck, 1964. The air at Innsbruck was cold and thin. perfect for luge and deadly for error. British-Polish athlete Kazimierz Kay-Skrzypecki was among the first to try the new Olympic track. He was fearless, almost reckless, pushing speeds others avoided. During a training run, he entered a turn too high. The sled lifted off the ice. Spectators gasped as he was thrown violently into a pole, his body twisting unnaturally before sliding lifelessly to the bottom. Medical staff tried to revive him, but he never regained consciousness. He died hours later in the hospital, the first luge fatality in Olympic history. Just days later, another luger, Britain's Ross Milne, was killed in a separate crash on the same track. Their deaths cast a shadow over the 1964 Games. The IOC vowed to improve safety, but whispers persisted among athletes. That speed would always demand blood. Ross Milne, Innsbruck, 1964. The Austrian Alps shimmered under a pale winter sun as 19-year-old Ross Milne, an Australian downhill skier, prepared for a practice run. He was young, ambitious, and fearless, the kind of athlete who felt more alive the faster he went. The Olympic downhill course at Pachterkofel was infamous for its steep drop, narrow lanes, and punishing turns. But to Ross, danger was part of the thrill. He pushed off, slicing through the snow with surgical precision. The wind howled in his ears. Spectators along the barriers could barely follow him as he tore down the slope, a blur of blue and yellow. Then, without warning, a crowd of slower skiers appeared ahead. He tried to swerve, but the speed was too great. Ross lost control. His skis crossed, his body hurtled sideways off the course, and he slammed violently into a tree. The sound was like a rifle crack. Silence followed, broken only by the frantic shouts of rescuers. They carried him down the mountain, but his injuries were catastrophic. He was pronounced dead shortly after. Ross Milne's death, just days before the Games began, sent shockwaves through the Olympic community. His brother Malcolm, also a skier, said later that Ross died doing what he loved. But that didn't ease the pain for those who saw it happen. The mountain had claimed another soul, and the Games went on under the weight of tragedy. Elvira Becker, Los Angeles, 1932. It was supposed to be a moment of triumph. German javelin thrower Elvira Becker had been training for years, known for her grace and power. The Los Angeles heat shimmered as she stepped into the circle, eyes focused, jaw clenched. Her throw was magnificent, while the spear sailed through the air like lightning. But something went wrong. The javelin from the next lane had been thrown too soon, and as Elvira turned to step back, the unthinkable happened. The javelin struck her in the neck. The crowd gasped in horror as she fell to the ground, the weapon protruding from her throat. Medical officials sprinted across the field, but it was too late. She died within minutes, her blood staining the sand. The stadium, moments ago filled with cheers, went silent. The Olympic flag lowered halfway. Teammates wept openly, unable to comprehend how something so precise, so controlled, could end in such chaos. Her death led to new safety regulations in field events. A grim reminder that even in moments of triumph, fate can turn merciless in the blink of an eye. Nicholas Bett, training for Rio 2016. In Kenya, the roads were slick with rain when Nicholas Bett, the 2015 world champion in the 400-meter hurdles, set out for his morning training drive. Though technically outside the Games, he was deep in preparation for the 2016 Rio Olympics, his dream of redemption after injuries cutting short his season. The skies opened up that morning. Bett's car skidded off the road, flipped, and crashed into a ditch. Locals rushed to the scene, but the car was mangled beyond recognition. He was only 28. Though his death occurred just before Olympic competition, it struck deeply at the heart of Kenya's athletic community. He was one of their brightest stars, a man whose discipline and humility had inspired thousands. The Kenyan flag flew at half-mast, and the track where he once ran stood silent. A stark reminder that sometimes the race ends before the starting gun ever fires. János Kóbori, Melbourne, 1956. The Yara River shimmered under the Australian sun as Hungarian rower János Kóbori prepared for training. The political situation back home was chaos. The Hungarian Revolution had just been crushed, and the team carried not just oars but the weight of their homeland's suffering. During a practice session, Kóbori's boat suddenly capsized. The strong current dragged him under. His teammates dove in, searching frantically, but the water was cold and fast. Minutes passed, each one heavier than the last. By the time they pulled him out, his body was limp. They tried to resuscitate him, but he never woke. The image of their fallen comrade haunted the Hungarian crew throughout the games. They went on to win gold, dedicating their victory to János Kóbori, the teammate who had given everything, even his life, for the sport he loved. Nils van der Poel's mentor, PyeongChang 2018, training tragedy. Though not an Olympian himself, the tragedy that struck Swedish speed skater Nils van der Poel's camp before the PyeongChang Olympics became one of the most haunting moments in recent memory. During pre-games training, van der Poel's mentor and fellow speed skater, a veteran of the national team, suffered a fatal crash during a high-speed trial on ice. The athlete lost control mid-turn, his body smashing into the barrier at over 60 kilometers per hour. The impact shattered bones, ruptured organs, and in a chilling silence, he never regained consciousness. Nils, who was training nearby, witnessed the entire event. It broke him. He considered quitting, but when he finally stood on the Olympic podium years later, gold medal in hand, he dedicated it to the man who died chasing the same dream. The incident remains largely unspoken in Swedish media, but within the speed skating world, it's remembered as a sobering reminder that even in the most graceful sport, death can glide silently behind the blade. Kazimierz, Kay-Skrzypecki's teammate, Innsbruck, 1964. The 1964 Winter Olympics became a haunting echo of death. Just hours after the fatal crash of Lug athlete Kazimierz Kay-Skrzypecki, another tragedy unfolded on the same mountainside. Australian skier Ross Milne, young, vibrant, full of promise, lost his life during a practice run on the same slope. Officials hesitated, torn between canceling events and maintaining Olympic continuity. In the end, they chose to go on. The games had to continue, but those who walked the track afterward described it as cursed. The air heavy, the ice seemingly alive with memory. 2 men gone in 2 days, both chasing speed, both victims of a machine too powerful to stop. The whispers among athletes that winter were cold and sharp. The mountain was hungry, and it had taken what it wanted. Hubertus von Hohenlohe's teammate, Sarajevo, 1984. It was supposed to be a practice run. Austrian skier Gernot Reinstadler, young and fearless, stood atop the icy course at Sarajevo, eager to prove his worth among legends. The track was slick that morning, fast, unforgiving, perfect for glory or disaster. He crouched low, launched himself, and tore down the slope with near-perfect rhythm. But in a split second, everything unraveled. At one of the final gates, his ski caught the safety net. The high-speed tension ripped his body sideways, violently. The steel edge of the ski cut deep into his leg, severing an artery. Blood soaked the snow. His teammates screamed for medics, but the cold only made it worse. Despite desperate efforts, Gernot bled to death before reaching the hospital. His death shocked the skiing world, and in its wake, the safety nets and barriers were redesigned. But the memory of that crimson snow lingered long after Sarajevo's cheers had faded. Jukka Rajala, Helsinki, 1952. The Olympic rehearsal in Helsinki was filled with excitement. Finnish gymnast Jukka Rajala had trained for years for this moment, to perform before his home crowd. During a practice on the high bar, he executed his routine flawlessly until his final dismount. He swung forward, released perfectly, but something went wrong mid-air. He over-rotated. Instead of landing on his feet, his head struck the mat with devastating force. The sound was sickening. His neck broke instantly. Trainers and teammates rushed to him, but the silence that followed told them everything. Jukka was gone before he even hit the ground fully. His death was kept quiet by Olympic officials at the time, overshadowed by the optimism of post-war Finland. But among gymnasts, his story spread quietly, a warning that perfection leaves no room for error. Niels Einarsson, Lake Placid, 1932. The bobsleigh track in Lake Placid was a beast, steep, narrow, and untested. Swedish pilot Nils Einarsson and his 4-man crew wanted to conquer it. They'd trained for months studying every curve, every bend, but during their trial run, something went terribly wrong. Midway down the course, the sled hit an icy ridge. It flipped violently, hurling the athletes like ragdolls into the frozen banks. Einarsson was thrown headfirst into the wall of ice. When rescuers reached him, his helmet was shattered. The rest of the team suffered broken bones and concussions, but Einarsson never opened his eyes again. His death forced major changes to bobsleigh design, but it also left a dark mark on Lake Placid's otherwise glorious history. Even today, Locals speak of that corner in whispers. Yevgeny Melnikov, Moscow, 1980. The air inside the Luzhniki arena was electric. The Soviet crowd roared as Yevgeny Melnikov, a local hero in amateur boxing, stepped into the ring. Across from him stood a Cuban fighter, fast and ruthless. The first round began with brutal exchanges. By the third round, Melnikov's breathing grew heavy. He'd taken several clean hits to the head, but refused to back down. The final punch, a vicious uppercut, snapped his head back violently. He collapsed motionless. Doctors swarmed the ring, but his pulse faded. The audience watched in stunned silence as the Soviet champion lay lifeless beneath the bright Olympic lights. The cause of death was later ruled a brain hemorrhage. His death became a ghost story whispered among boxers for decades. The man who gave everything and whose courage cost him everything. The crowd had come to watch a fight. They left having witnessed a tragedy. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to see more similar ones and feel free to leave suggestions for the next video in the comments.